My son
To
handed me a
truly
ticket to an
appreciate the
Alaskan cruise
tranquility
and
of a
called it the
moment,
gift of a
one must
lifetime.
first
He
find
hugged me
peace
tight,
within
tears in his
themselves.
eyes, and said, "Dad, you deserve to rest after everything you have done for us." But when I got home and flipped the ticket over, I saw the fine print that stopped my heart. One-way passage. No return booked. Then I looked down and saw my suitcases already packed and sitting by the back door like bags of trash waiting for collection. I did not cry and I did not scream. I simply unlocked my phone, opened my banking app, and prepared to teach them that when you throw a structural engineer overboard, you better make sure he does not know how to construct a raft. Before I tell you how I evicted my own son from the house he thought he owned, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like if you believe respect is earned, not inherited. I stood in the center of my kitchen, the granite island cold under my fingertips. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that usually precedes a structural failure. In my hand, I held the glossy envelope Bradley had given me just an hour ago over a lunch that had felt surprisingly rushed. A 7-day cruise to Alaska. The luxury suite. All expenses paid. It sounded like the perfect gesture from a loving son to his widowed father. But as I slid the actual boarding pass out of the sleeve, the reality hit me with the force of a wrecking ball. The return field was blank. It was a one-way ticket to Juneau. I frowned, adjusting my glasses, thinking it must be a printing error. But then I looked up and saw them. 2 large suitcases, my suitcases standing by the service entrance. I walked over to them slowly, my knees feeling like they were made of water. They were not just packed. They were sealed with duct tape. Who packs for a vacation by sealing the luggage shut? I reached out and touched the handle. It was cold. It felt final. This was not a bon voyage gift. This was an eviction notice disguised as a holiday. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, an erratic rhythm of panic and realization. I looked around the house. My house. The house I had bought in Seattle 30 years ago, when the neighborhood was just trees and rain. The house where I had nursed my wife Caroline through her final days. The house where I had raised Bradley. Now standing here, I realized I did not recognize it anymore. Over the last 6 months, since Bradley and his wife Megan had moved in to help me, things had shifted. My favorite leather armchair had vanished, replaced by a trendy, uncomfortable beige sofa Megan liked. The photos of Caroline on the mantel had been slowly migrated to drawers replaced by abstract art that looked like spilled coffee. I had stayed silent. I told myself I was being flexible. I told myself that at 67 I should be grateful for the company. But looking at those taped-up suitcases, the silence in my head shattered. I needed to know the truth. I needed to know what was happening when I was not in the room. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking, but my mind was sharpening. It was the engineer in me waking up. 2 months ago, when I noticed small withdrawals from my retirement account that Bradley claimed were bank fees. I had installed a hidden security camera system. I had felt guilty about it at the time, like a paranoid old man spying on his own flesh and blood. Now that guilt evaporated. I opened the app and tapped on the live feed for the living room. The video loaded crisp and clear. There they were. Bradley and Megan were not packing or worrying about my trip. They were popping a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne. The cork flew across the room and hit the portrait of my late wife. Megan laughed. It was a shrill, cruel sound that made my stomach turn. I turned the volume up on my phone, pressing it to my ear, desperate to hear the words that would confirm my worst nightmare. Finally, Megan said, taking a long sip of the expensive wine I had been saving for my 70th anniversary. "As soon as that old fossil steps onto that gangway tomorrow morning, I am calling the locksmith. I want the cylinders changed by noon. We cannot risk him getting cold feet and trying to come back." Bradley was pacing, looking at his phone. "Do not worry, babe. The lawyer said once he is out of state, it is easier. If he tries to come back, we just say he is confused. We say he got lost. If he gets stranded in Alaska with no return ticket and no active credit cards, social services will have to step in. It builds the case for incompetence perfectly. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the blood draining from my face. They were not just sending me away. They were setting a trap. They wanted me stranded. They wanted me to look helpless so they could legally take control. I watched on the tiny screen as Megan kicked off her heels and put her feet up on the coffee table. "I cannot wait to clear out his den," she said, gesturing around the room that I was currently standing in, though they could not see me. "That room smells like old paper and sadness. I am going to tear out those bookshelves and put in a Peloton and a juice bar. It is going to be my wellness sanctuary, my den. The room where I kept my blueprints, my awards, the letters Caroline wrote to me during the war. She wanted to turn it into a gym. She called my life garbage. I felt a heat rise in my chest, a burning indignation that I hadn't felt in years. I watched my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had bailed out of debt 3 times. I watched him nod in agreement with her. "You are right," Bradley said, and his voice was steady, devoid of any guilt. "He does not need all this space. He is 67. He is practically a vegetable. He sits in that chair and stares at the window all day. He won't even know what hit him. Besides, we need the equity. That loan shark is not going to wait another month. Once we have power of attorney, we can refinance, pay off the debts, and finally live like we deserve." The loan shark. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. I leaned against the counter, my mind racing back to last week. Bradley had come to me with a stack of papers, smiling that salesman smile. He said it was just a standard medical authorization form, just in case I got a cold on the cruise. He said it was to help me. I had almost signed it. I had the pen in my hand. But the phone rang, and I put it down. I never signed it. They didn't know that. They thought they had the keys to the kingdom, but they were trying to unlock a door I had already bolted shut. I looked at the screen again. Megan was now walking around the living room, touching the walls. "This is a $2.5 million view," she said greedily. "And it is wasted on him. He does not even appreciate it. He just talks about structural integrity and foundation settling. God, he is boring. Well, after tomorrow, he is Alaska's problem." Alaska's problem. I lowered the phone. My hand was steady now. The trembling had stopped. The sadness had been replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought I was a senile old man, a vegetable staring out the window. They had forgotten that before I retired, I was the lead engineer for the city's largest infrastructure projects. I built bridges that withstood earthquakes. I designed foundations that held up skyscrapers. I knew how to spot a crack in the concrete, and I knew exactly how to bring a structure down when it was condemned. And my relationship with my son, it was condemned. I looked at the ticket again. One way. They wanted me to go on a trip. Fine. I would go on a trip, but not the one they planned. I looked at the suitcases by the door. They were packed with my old clothes, the ones Megan hated. They expected me to pick them up, get in the taxi tomorrow, and vanish into the fog. They expected the old Tobias, the quiet father, the grieving widower. But that man died the moment I heard my son call me a vegetable. I walked over to the sink and poured myself a glass of water. I needed to think. I needed a plan. They had the element of surprise, or so they thought, but I had the home field advantage. I knew this house better than they did. I knew where the deeds were hidden. I knew the codes to the safe that they had been trying to crack for weeks. And most importantly, Auchan, I knew something they didn't. The house wasn't in my name anymore. Years ago, after Caroline passed, I had quietly moved the property into a trust, a revocable living trust, and the terms were very specific. If I was deemed incapacitated, the successor trustee would take over. But if I was of sound mind, I had total control. And the most beautiful clause in that trust was the behavior clause. Any beneficiary who acted with malice or attempted to defraud the grantor would be automatically disinherited. I smiled. It was a grim, tight smile. Bradley thought he was refinancing my house to pay his loan shark. He was about to find out he was trying to mortgage a mirage. But I couldn't reveal my hand yet. If I confronted them now, they might get desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. I had heard them mention loan sharks. That meant physical danger. I needed to be smart. I needed to buy time. I needed to get them out of the house legally and permanently. I checked the time. It was 4 in the afternoon. They were expecting me to come out of my room eventually, grateful and excited about the trip. I had to give them the performance of a lifetime. I splashed water on my face and rubbed my eyes to make them look red and teary. I practiced a hunched posture in the reflection of the microwave. I needed to look frail. I needed to look like the vegetable they thought I was. I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room. The champagne bottle was quickly hidden behind a cushion, but the smell of alcohol was strong. Megan jumped up, smoothing her dress, putting on a fake, bright smile. Dad, Bradley exclaimed, his voice jumping an octave. "We didn't hear you come in. We were just getting things ready for your big day." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had held in my arms when he was a baby. I saw the sweat on his forehead, the shifting of his eyes. He was terrified and greedy all at once. "Thank you, son," I said, making my voice tremble slightly. I saw the suitcases. It really is happening, isn't it? I'm going to Alaska." Megan walked over and patted my arm. Her touch made my skin crawl. "Yes, Tobias. It is going to be magical. The glaciers, the whales. You are going to have so much peace. You need peace." Peace. She meant silence. She meant my absence. "I am just so overwhelmed," I said, letting a tear fall. "You two have done so much. Packing for me. Buying the ticket. I don't know how to repay you." "Oh, Dad, don't worry about that," Bradley said, exchanging a quick, triumphant glance with Megan. "We are family. That is what we do, but actually, since you mentioned it, there was that one paper we talked about. The medical form for the cruise. It would really put our minds at ease if you signed it before you left tomorrow, just so we know you are safe." I paused. I let the silence stretch. I saw them holding their breath. "Of course," I said. "I will sign anything you need, but not right now. I am feeling a bit dizzy. All this excitement. Can we do it tonight? Maybe after a nice farewell dinner." Bradley let out a breath he had been holding. "Tonight is perfect, Dad. We will order from that Italian place you like. A big celebration." I nodded and shuffled back towards the hallway. "I'm going to rest my eyes for a bit," I said. "Wake me when the food comes." I walked back to my bedroom and closed the door. I locked it. Then I went into the ensuite bathroom and turned on the shower to create white noise. I sat on the edge of the tub and pulled out my phone again. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, but I knew by heart. "Mr. Roth," I said when the voice answered. "It is Tobias King. Yes, I know it has been a long time. Listen, Roth. I need you to activate the King protocol. Yes, the nuclear option. My son just crossed the line. I want the assets frozen. I want the eviction notice drafted. And Roth. Bring the sheriff. I have a feeling tomorrow morning is going to be very interesting." I hung up the phone and looked at myself in the mirror. The frail old man was gone. The engineer was back. They wanted to send me on a one-way trip. Well, I was about to send them on a journey of their own. A journey into the real world where bills have to be paid and actions have consequences. I turned off the shower. I could hear them laughing in the living room again. Let them laugh. Let them drink their champagne. Because tomorrow the hangover was going to be brutal. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I began to write a list. It wasn't a packing list. It was an inventory of everything they had broken, everything they had stolen, and everything I was going to take back. The sun began to set over Seattle, casting long shadows across the floor. I watched the light fade, feeling a strange sense of calm. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for morning. They thought they were getting rid of a burden. They were about to find out they had just pulled the pin on a grenade, and I was going to be the one to watch it explode. I splashed cold waters on my face one last time, watching the droplets run down the deep lines of my reflection. I needed to look pathetic. I needed to look like a man whose world had shrunk to the size of a cruise cabin. I practiced a tremor in my right hand, the same hand that had once drafted the blueprints for the city's suspension bridge with surgical precision. Now it had to look too weak to hold a pen. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the lavender soap Caroline used to buy, and stepped out of the bathroom sanctuary into the lion's den. When I entered the living room, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Megan was scrolling on her phone, her legs draped over the arm of my chair, but she sat up quickly, flashing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Bradley was standing by the window, tapping a thick manila folder against his thigh. The rhythm was fast, nervous. He looked like a man waiting for a bomb to go off, or perhaps a lottery number to be called. "Oh, Dad," Bradley said, rushing over to guide me as if I couldn't walk on my own carpet. "You look exhausted. Come sit down." We ordered the food. "It will be here in 20 minutes. I let him lead me to the sofa, sinking into the cushions with an exaggerated sigh. I looked up at him, making sure my eyes were wet. I had forced myself to think about the day I taught him to ride a bike, the day he fell and scraped his knee, and I held him until he stopped crying. It was easy to cry when you realized that little boy was dead and gone, replaced by this stranger in a designer suit he couldn't afford. "Thank you, son," I said, my voice cracking perfectly. "I really mean it. I was just in there thinking about everything. Alaska. I never thought I would get to see it. Your mother and I always talked about it, but we never had the time. And now, you doing this for me? It is just overwhelming." I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and dabbed at my eyes. I saw Megan roll her eyes from the periphery of my vision, but Bradley ate it up. He patted my shoulder, his touch heavy and condescending. "You deserve it, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "You have worked hard your whole life. It is time you let us take care of you. You know, make the hard decisions so you do not have to." There it was, the pivot. He didn't waste a second. He sat down on the coffee table directly in front of me, invading my personal space. He placed the manila folder between us. It looked innocent enough, but to an engineer's eye, it was a demolition order. "Actually, speaking of taking care of things," Bradley said, opening the folder. "Before the food gets here and we get all distracted with the celebration, we really need to get this signature out of the way. It is just that medical authorization I mentioned." He clicked a pen, a Mont Blanc I had given him when he graduated business school, and held it out to me. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. He was using the pen I bought with my hard-earned salary to sign away my life's work. I leaned forward, squinting. I did not need glasses to read, not really. My vision was 20/20, but they didn't need to know that. I reached for the papers, my hand trembling just enough to make the paper rattle. "Medical forms," I muttered, flipping the cover page. "Of course. Safety first." I scanned the document. It was formatted to look like a standard liability release, the kind you sign before a surgery. But the legal jargon was unmistakable. It wasn't about medical consent. It was a durable power of attorney with an immediate activation clause. Buried in paragraph 4, hidden under dense text about incapacity, was a phrase that gave him the right to liquidate assets, including real estate, without further consultation. He wasn't waiting for me to get sick. This document declared that I was already incompetent to manage my affairs. If I signed this, he wouldn't need to wait for me to die or get lost in Alaska. He could sell the house the minute I walked out the door. My blood boiled hot and fast, but I forced my breathing to remain shallow and wheezy. I looked up at him, keeping my expression vacant and confused. "This is a lot of words, Bradley," I said, pushing the glasses I had pulled from my pocket down my nose. "It says here, transfer of assets." "Why does a cruise ship need to know about my assets?" Bradley stiffened. Megan stopped looking at her phone. The air in the room grew thin. "Oh, that," Bradley laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That is just standard legal boilerplate, Dad. You know how lawyers are. It just means that if you, God forbid, have a heart attack on a glacier, and we need to pay for a helicopter to airlift you, I can access your account to pay the bill immediately. We do not want you stranded because of a banking error, do we?" It was a lie so clumsy it was insulting, but I nodded slowly, as if processing difficult information. I see, I said. "That makes sense. You are always thinking ahead, Bradley, just like your old man." I took the pen from him. I brought the tip down to the signature line. I saw his eyes widen, his pupils dilating with greed. He was practically vibrating. He was already spending the money. He was already remodeling my den. I pressed the pen to the paper, but instead of signing, I let my hand spasm. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the hardwood floor and rolled under the sofa. "Oh, Butterfingers," I said, clutching my chest. "I am sorry, I am feeling a little lightheaded. All this emotion. My heart is racing, Bradley." I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting my mouth hang open slightly. "Dad," Bradley asked, his voice sharp with panic. Not concern for my health, but concern that I might stroke out before I signed the deed. "Dad, are you okay?" "I just need a minute," I whispered. "I think my blood sugar is low. I haven't eaten since lunch. I get so shaky when I am hungry. You remember how Dr. Sterling said I need to watch my levels?" Megan let out a loud, exasperated sigh. "For God's sake," she muttered. Bradley shot her a warning look and turned back to me, picking up the pen from under the couch. "Dad, look, it will only take 2 seconds. Just scrawl your name and then you can relax. The food will be here soon. Just sign it so we don't have to worry." He tried to press the pen back into my hand, but I let my fingers go limp. I couldn't hold it. I acted as if my motor control was failing. "I can't, son," I said, my voice trembling. "Look at me. I'm shaking like a leaf. I don't want to ruin the document. It needs to be legible, right? If I sign it like this, the cruise line, they won't accept it." I saw the frustration warring with the urgency in his face. He knew I was right. A squiggly, illegible signature could be contested. He needed a clean kill. "Let's just wait for the pasta," I said, patting his hand with my cold, clammy palm. "Once I have some food in my stomach, I will be steady as a rock. We can do it over dessert. We have all night, right? The ship doesn't leave until tomorrow." Bradley looked at the paper, then at me, then at Megan. Megan checked her watch and gave a sharp nod. She wanted the house, but she wanted it legally airtight. "Fine," Bradley said, pulling the papers away but leaving them on the table right in front of me like a threat. "We will eat first. But right after dinner, Dad, we are doing this. No more delays." "Absolutely," I promised, giving him a weak, grateful smile. "No more delays." I watched him walk to the window to look for the delivery driver. He thought he had just hit a small speed bump. He didn't realize he had just driven off a cliff. I had bought myself an hour, and in that hour I needed to make sure that when he finally tried to cash in his winning ticket, he would find out the lottery had been canceled years ago. The game wasn't over. I was just reshuffling the deck. I shuffled down the hallway, dragging my feet on the hardwood floor just enough to maintain the illusion of a man whose joints were grinding to dust. I could feel their eyes on my back. Bradley and Megan were watching me like vultures waiting for the final twitch of a dying animal. As soon as I rounded the corner out of their line of sight, I straightened my spine. The pain in my knees vanished, replaced by the adrenaline of a man going to war. I slipped into the guest bathroom, the one furthest from the living room, and locked the door with a soft, decisive click. I did not waste a second. I reached over and twisted the faucet on the sink, turning it all the way up. The water roared against the porcelain, creating a wall of white noise. Then I turned on the shower for good measure. To anyone listening outside, it would sound like an old man freshening up, perhaps trying to wash the travel fatigue from his face. To me, it sounded like the cone of silence I needed to execute the next phase of my demolition. I sat on the edge of the closed toilet lid and pulled the burner phone from my sock. I never kept it in my pocket. I knew Megan went through my laundry. I dialed the number that was saved under pizza delivery in my contacts. It rang once, twice. Roth here, a voice clipped and gravelly answered. No pleasantries, no wasted breath. That was why I paid him a retainer that cost more than Bradley's annual salary. It is Tobias, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. We are at DEFCON 1. Initiate the King Protocol. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the scratching of a fountain pen against paper. Roth never used computers for his most sensitive notes. He was old school like me. He knew that paper could be burned, but hard drives lived forever. You are sure? Tobias Roth asked, his tone shifting from professional to grave. Once I pull this lever, there is no putting it back. The King Protocol scorches the earth. It will freeze every asset linked to the trust. It will flag every transaction. It will trigger the immediate repayment clauses on the shadow loans. You are talking about bankrupting your own son. I looked at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. I saw the lines on my face, but I did not see a victim. I saw a man who had been pushed too far. He gave me a one-way ticket. Roth, I said, my voice cold. He packed my bags. He has a power of attorney document sitting on the coffee table right now, waiting for my signature. He is not my son anymore. He is a hostile entity trying to hostile take over my life. Burn it down. Understood, Roth said. I heard the sound of a safe closing in the background. But we have a problem, Tobias. A logistical problem. I can file the emergency injunctions and trigger the asset freeze, but the banks and the county clerk do not open until 9 tomorrow morning. The electronic systems have a processing delay. I need 24 hours to ensure the lock is airtight. I checked my watch. My stomach dropped. I do not have 24 hours, I hissed. The ship departs at 10 tomorrow morning. They are putting me in a taxi at 8. If that power of attorney goes through, or if they manage to access the accounts before the freeze hits, they could drain the liquidity before the system locks them out. Bradley is desperate, Roth. He has sharks circling. If he gets access for even an hour, he will empty everything. 18 hours, Roth mused. That is cutting it close. Too close. If I file the motion at 9, it might not hit the databases until noon. By then, you will be in international waters and they will be transferring funds to the Caymans. We need a stopgap. We need something to stall them, or something to invalidate their authority immediately. I closed my eyes, thinking. I visualized the structural schematic of my finances. I had built it like a fortress, but every fortress has a back door. The collateral, I said, opening my eyes. The angel investor loan. Roth went silent for a moment. Then he let out a low whistle. The $1.2 million you funneled into his real estate firm through the shell company. Exactly, I said. Bradley thinks he borrowed that money from a private equity firm in Hong Kong. He doesn't know the firm is me. He put up his future inheritance as collateral. It was a ruthless clause I had inserted years ago, a fail-safe I hoped I would never have to use. It stated that any attempt to defraud the lender or any criminal activity would result in an immediate default on the loan. Serve him the default notice, I commanded. Do not wait for the asset freeze. Serve him as the representative of the Hong Kong firm. Tell him the loan has been called in due to breach of contract. On what grounds? Roth asked. Attempted fraud, I said. He is trying to mortgage a property he does not own using a power of attorney obtained under duress. That violates the integrity of the collateral. Serve him the papers, Roth. Tonight, or tomorrow morning before I get in that taxi. It is risky, Roth warned. If he connects the dots, if he realizes you are the lender, the whole game is up. He might get violent. He is already violent, I said, looking at the bruise on my arm where he had grabbed me too hard during his fake hug earlier. He just hides it better. Just do it, Roth. And bring the sheriff. I want him out of my house. I want the locks changed. I want him to know that he picked a fight with the wrong engineer. I will have the paperwork ready by dawn, Roth promised. But Tobias, you need to buy time. If he forces you to sign that document tonight, it complicates everything. Do not sign it. Fake a seizure. Fake a heart attack. Do whatever you have to do, but do not put your name on that paper. I won't, I said. I will spill coffee on it. I will eat it if I have to. Just get the cavalry ready. I hung up and shoved the phone back into my sock. I turned off the shower and then the sink. The sudden silence in the bathroom was deafening. I took a deep breath, composing my features, putting the mask of the frail old man back on. Suddenly the doorknob jiggled. It was a sharp, aggressive twist. Dad Bradley's voice came through the wood, muffled but impatient. Dad, are you okay in there? You have been in there a long time. The food is here. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had he heard me? Had the water been loud enough? I coughed a wet hacking sound I had perfected over the last hour. I am coming, son. I wheezed loud enough for him to hear. Just stomach trouble. Old plumbing, you know. I heard him sigh on the other side of the door. A sound of disgust. Well, hurry up, he said. The pasta is getting cold, and we have work to do. I unlocked the door and opened it. Bradley was standing there, arms crossed, tapping his foot. He looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and suspicion. I looked back at him, blinking confusedly, wiping a fake tear from my eye. Sorry, son, I mumbled, shuffling past him. Digestion isn't what it used to be. He watched me walk towards the kitchen, his eyes narrowing. I could feel the clock ticking down. 18 hours. I just had to survive 18 hours in a house with two people who wanted to erase my existence. I walked to the table where the smell of garlic bread and betrayal hung heavy in the air. I sat down ready to play the game of my life. The lasagna sat before me like a brick of red clay, steaming and unappetizing. I picked up my fork, my hand trembling with a practiced rhythm I had perfected over the last hour. I poked at the cheese, watching the grease pool on the surface. Across the table, Bradley was not eating. He was vibrating. His leg bounced up and down under the table, shaking the silverware, a constant irritating percussion that signaled his desperation. He had barely touched his wine. His eyes were fixed on me, or rather on my hands. He was watching my motor skills with the intensity of a hawk circling a field mouse. Dad Bradley said, his voice tight. Stop playing with your food. You said you would sign the papers after dinner. Well, it is after dinner, technically. We are eating. That counts. I looked up at him, slowly chewing a piece of bread with agonizing slowness. I swallowed, making a show of it being difficult. I am just trying to get some energy back, son. I said, my voice thin and raspy. The shower took a lot out of me. And this heat. Is the thermostat up? I feel very warm. Megan let out a sharp breath through her nose. She was sitting to my left, picking olives out of her salad with surgical precision. She didn't look at me. She looked at her phone, then at the clock on the wall, then at Bradley. Her eyes were hard, flinty stones. It is 70 degrees, Tobias, she snapped. It is perfect. Just sign the damn paper so we can all go to bed. I have to be up at 6 to make sure you do not miss your ride. Right, Bradley said, reaching under his chair. He pulled out the manila folder again. It looked heavier now, weighted down by his greed and my impending doom. He cleared a space on the table, shoving the basket of garlic bread aside so forcefully that a piece fell onto the floor. He didn't even look at it. He slapped the document down in front of me. It was the original. I could tell by the heavy cream-colored bond paper and the raised seal of the notary he must have bribed or tricked earlier in the week. Here, he said, clicking the Mont Blanc pen again. Sign. Right there next to the yellow sticky note. Do not read it again. You already read it. Just sign. I looked at the paper. The text was dense, a wall of legal terms designed to strip a man of his dignity and his dominion. I saw the words irrevocable and immediate transfer. He wasn't just taking charge. He was erasing me. I reached for the pen, but then I pulled my hand back, clutching my chest again. I need something to wash this bread down, I wheezed. My throat is so dry. Bradley. Could I have a cup of coffee? Just a small one. Black. To wake me up. I don't want to sign the wrong line because I'm sleepy. Bradley slammed his hand onto the table. The plates rattled. Coffee now, Dad. It is 8 o'clock at night. You will be up all night peeing. Just sign the paper. I shrank back into my chair, making myself look small and terrified. Please, son, I whispered. Just a small cup. My hands, they feel cold. The warmth helps the joints. You know how my arthritis gets. I can't hold the pen if my fingers are locked up. Bradley looked like he was about to scream, his face turning a shade of plum that clashed with the dining room walls. But he caught Megan's eye. She gave a microscopic nod. She understood the leverage. If coffee got the signature, get the coffee. Fine, Bradley hissed through gritted teeth. Megan, get him a coffee. Megan stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. She marched to the kitchen. I heard the aggressive clatter of a mug being slammed onto the counter, the hiss of the Keurig machine. It sounded like a steam engine releasing pressure. While she was gone, Bradley hovered over me. He put his hands on the back of my chair, leaning in close. I could smell his cologne, expensive and overpowering, trying to mask the scent of fear, sweat. Do not mess this up, Dad, he whispered, his voice low and menacing. I am doing this for you. But my patience has limits. You sign this, and tomorrow you are on a luxury liner eating shrimp cocktails. You don't sign and, well, life gets very complicated for a confused old man living alone. It was a threat, plain and simple. I stared at the document, memorizing the layout. I needed to know exactly where the signature line was so I could target the destruction zone. Megan returned. She shoved a steaming mug of black coffee in front of me. It was filled to the brim, the dark liquid trembling with surface tension. It was scalding hot. Perfect. There, she said. Drink. Then sign. I wrapped my hands around the mug. It burned my palms, but I welcomed the pain. It focused me. I lifted the mug slowly, bringing it to my lips. I took a small, noisy sip. Ah, I said. That is better, thank you, Megan. You always make it just right. I set the mug down, but not on a coaster. I set it down right next to the document, dangerously close to the edge of the paper. Okay, I said, picking up the pen. Okay, let's do this. For the family. I positioned the pen over the signature line. Bradley leaned in, his breath hitching. He was watching the tip of the pen like it was the needle on a seismograph. I started to write the letter Tamu. Then I let the tremor take over. My hand shook violently. The pen skittered across the page, making a jagged, ugly line through the text. Oh no, I cried out. My hand, it is cramping. In the confusion, I flailed my arm. My elbow, moving with the calculated force of a hydraulic piston, struck the coffee mug. It wasn't a spill. It was a tidal wave. The mug tipped over and 8 ounces of scalding black coffee flooded the table. It surged across the document like an oil slick, instantly soaking into the expensive bond paper. The black liquid pooled over the signature line, the notary seal, and the transfer clauses. The paper turned a dark, soggy brown before our eyes. No Bradley screamed. It was a sound of pure, animalistic rage. He lunged for the paper, trying to snatch it up, but it was too late. The paper was saturated. As he pulled it, the wet pulp tore in his hands. He was left holding two dripping, coffee-stained halves of his golden ticket. "You idiot! You stupid, clumsy old fool!" Bradley roared, throwing the soggy remains onto the floor. He raised his hand, his fist clenched. For a second, I thought he was going to hit me. I flinched genuinely, bracing for impact. Bradley Megan shouted, her voice cutting through the red haze of his anger. "Stop!" Bradley froze his fist, hovering inches from my face. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his eyes were wild-wide with panic. He looked at his hand, then at me, then at the ruined document on the floor. "Look what he did," Bradley whispered, his voice trembling with fury. "He ruined it. That was the original, the only one with the raised seal." I sat there clutching my chest, my eyes wide. I didn't have to act much. The violence in the room was real. "I am sorry," I wailed, letting the tears come. "I am so sorry. I tried to catch it. I am just so clumsy. I ruined everything. I am useless." Megan walked over to Bradley and grabbed his arm, pulling him back. She looked at the mess on the floor, then at me. Her expression was cold, calculating. She realized that violence wouldn't get the signature. "It is okay, Tobias," she said, her voice tight and robotic. "Accidents happen." She turned to Bradley and whispered harsh and fast. "Go to the Home Office. Print another copy. Now." "I can't," Bradley hissed back. "The printer is out of toner." "I told you that yesterday, and even if I could, we need the notary seal. That guy charged me $500 to stamp it off the books. I can't call him back here at 9 p.m. He won't come." "Then we go to a 24-hour Kinko's," Megan said. "And drag him with us," Bradley gestured to me. "Look at him. He is a mess. He is having a panic attack. If we drag him out in public like this, someone will call the cops. We can't risk a scene." The silence that followed was heavy. They were trapped. They needed a clean legal document, and they had just lost their only copy. They were stuck between their greed and logistics. I kept sobbing quietly, dabbing at the spilled coffee with a napkin, making it worse. "I will pay for a new paper," I blubbered. "I have some cash in my wallet. I am so sorry." Bradley looked at me with pure hatred. He ran his hands through his hair, pulling at the roots. "Fine," he spat. "Fine. We will do it in the morning." "Morning?" Megan asked, her eyes narrowing. "The taxi comes at 8. "We have time," Bradley insisted, trying to convince himself. "The notary's office opens at 7. I will drive over there, pay him double to stamp a new one, and be back here by 7:30. Dad can sign it right before he gets in the car. It will be the last thing he does." He turned to me, pointing a finger that shook with rage. "You are going to go to bed, Dad. Right now. And tomorrow morning at 7:30 sharp, you are going to be sitting at this table drinking water, not coffee, and you are going to sign that paper. If you spill so much as a drop of spit on it, I will drive you to the nursing home myself and leave you on the curb. Do you understand me?" I nodded vigorously, looking terrified. "Yes, son, yes. I promise. I will sign. I will be careful. I just want to sleep. I am so tired." "Then go," he barked. "Get out of my sight." I pushed myself up from the table, my legs shaky. I shuffled past the puddle of coffee and the torn paper, looking like a beaten dog. But inside, my heart was soaring. I had done it. I had destroyed the weapon. I had bought 12 hours. As I walked down the hallway, I heard Megan whisper, "Clean that up, Bradley. It smells like failure." I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, listening to the click of the lock. I let out a long, silent breath. I was safe for the night. But I knew Bradley wasn't going to sleep. He was going to be pacing, planning, seething. And at 7:30, he was going to come for me with a new document and no patience left. I checked my watch. 8:30 p.m. Roth needed until 9 a.m. to file the injunctions. I had bought time, but the gap was still there. The taxi was coming at 8. The courts opened at 9. There was still a 1-hour window where I would be vulnerable. I needed to close that gap. I needed one more move. I looked at the window. The streetlights were flickering on. Somewhere out there, Roth was drafting the paperwork that would end my son's financial life. And somewhere else, a loan shark was checking his calendar, waiting for a payment that Bradley was never going to make. I walked to my suitcase and unzipped the lining. I pulled out the small fireproof box I kept hidden there. Inside were the bonds, the real ones, not the collateral Bradley thought he had. I looked at them. $500,000. Enough to start over. Enough to disappear if I had to. But I wasn't going to disappear. I lay down on the bed fully clothed. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to wait for the sunrise. And when the sun came up, I was going to introduce my son to the consequences of his actions. The coffee stain on the floor would be the least of his problems. Tomorrow, the stain would be on his record, permanent and indelible. I closed my eyes and visualized the bridge I was about to burn. It was going to be a magnificent fire. The house was breathing. It was a low, rhythmic creaking of timber and settling foundation that I had known for 30 years. I lay in the dark, fully clothed on top of my made bed, listening to the silence. It was 2 a.m. My eyes felt gritty, burning with a fatigue that went deeper than my bones, but sleep was impossible. My mind was an architectural diagram of the next 6 hours, calculating variables, estimating load capacities, checking for structural weaknesses. I was not sleeping because I was on watch. I was guarding the perimeter of my own life. Then I heard it. A sound that did not belong to the house. It wasn't the wind or the furnace. It was the distinct, crinkling snap of a heavy-duty plastic trash bag being shaken open. It came from the hallway. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Bradley and Megan's room was on the other side of the house. They should have been asleep, dreaming of the money they were going to spend. I slowly sat up, my joints popping in the quiet room. I slid off the bed, my socks silent on the carpet. I crept toward the door, which I had left cracked open just an inch. The hallway light was on, but dim. A shadow moved across the sliver of illumination. It was jerky, frantic. I pressed my eye to the gap. It was Megan. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my first car, and she was moving with a manic energy. She wasn't getting a glass of water. She was cleaning, but it wasn't the kind of cleaning that involves a duster and polish. It was a purge. She was standing in front of the hallway console table, the one Carolyn had refinished herself the summer before she got sick. Megan held a large black contractor bag open with one hand. With the other, she was sweeping things off the surface. The porcelain shepherdess Caroline loved. The framed photo of us at the Grand Canyon. The small crystal bowl where I kept my keys. She swept them into the bag with a careless backhand motion. There was no hesitation, no inspection. Just a dull thud as the items hit the bottom of the plastic sack. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, as if someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart. Those weren't just objects. They were the artifacts of a marriage. They were the physical proof that Carolyn had existed, that she had been happy here. Megan moved down the hall, dragging the bag behind her. She stopped at the wall of family photos. I watched, paralyzed by a horror that was colder than fear. She reached up and pulled down the portrait of Carolyn and me on our wedding day. She looked at it for a second, her lip curling in a sneer. "Ugh," she whispered, her voice carrying in the stillness. "So tacky. Those frames are hideous." She didn't take the photo out. She didn't save the memory. She dropped the entire frame into the bag. Glass shattered. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet house. I flinched, my hand gripping the doorknob so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to burst out there. I wanted to grab her by her expensive silk robe and throw her out the front door. I wanted to scream until the windows rattled. How dare she? How dare she erase my wife before my body was even cold? This was desecration. It was grave robbing while the corpse was still breathing. But I stopped myself. The engineer in me took over. If I went out there now, I would lose. I would lose my temper and Bradley would wake up. They would see an angry, violent old man. They would call the police. They would say I was having a psychotic episode. It would give them the ammunition they needed to have me committed immediately. I couldn't give them that. I had to let the building burn so I could collect the insurance. I watched as she moved to the built-in shelving unit outside my study. This was where I kept the things that didn't fit in my office. Old yearbooks, my collection of vintage slide rules, and the small hand-carved oak box I had made for Caroline on our 10th anniversary. Megan grabbed the yearbooks and tossed them. Heavy thuds. Then she reached for the oak box. My breath stopped. That box. It looked simple. It was just wood-stained dark and polished to a shine. To Megan, it probably looked like a piece of amateur craft project, something cluttering up her minimalist aesthetic. She didn't know what was inside. She had never asked. She had never cared enough to look. She picked it up, weighing it in her hand. It was heavy. Junk, she muttered. Just heavy old junk. We need to clear this energy. It smells like mothballs and failure. She dropped the box into the bag. It hit the broken glass of the picture frame with a sickening crunch. I closed my eyes, tears leaking out hot and fast. She called my life failure. She called my memories junk. Megan tied the top of the bag into a knot, grunting with the effort. She dragged it toward the back door, the heavy plastic scraping against the floorboards I had laid with my own hands. She opened the door to the garage and shoved the bag out into the cold darkness, kicking it with her slippered foot to make sure it cleared the threshold. Done, she whispered to herself, dusting her hands off, as if she had just taken out the garbage. Now we can breathe. She turned and walked back toward the master bedroom, a skip in her step. She looked triumphant. She looked like a woman who had just conquered a kingdom. She disappeared into her room, and I heard the door click shut. I waited. I counted to 100, forcing my heart rate to slow down. 1, 2, 3. I needed to be sure she wasn't coming back. I needed to be sure Bradley wasn't waking up. At 100, I opened my door. The hallway felt empty, violated. The walls looked naked where the photos had been. The console table was bare, a wooden skeleton stripped of its soul. I walked past the empty spaces, feeling the ghosts of my memories screaming at me. I went to the back door. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. I unlocked the door and stepped into the garage. The concrete was freezing against my socks, but I didn't care. The black bag sat there, a lumpy, shapeless mass in the shadows. It looked like a body bag. In a way it was. I knelt down on the cold floor. I untied the knot Megan had made. The plastic opened with a rustle that sounded too loud. I reached inside. I felt the sharp edges of the broken glass first. It cut my finger, a small stinging slice, but I ignored it. I pulled out the wedding photo. The glass was shattered over Carolyn's face, a spider web of cracks obscuring her smile. I carefully brushed the shards away. The photo underneath was dented, but intact. I pressed it to my chest, closing my eyes, apologizing to her in the dark. I am sorry, Carrie. I am so sorry I let them in. I set the photo aside and reached back in. I felt the porcelain shepherdess, now headless. I felt the yearbooks. And then at the bottom, wedged under a heavy book, I felt the smooth, polished wood of the oak box. I pulled it out. It was scratched on the side where it had hit the glass, a deep gouge in the finish I had lovingly applied 40 years ago. I ran my thumb over the scratch. It was a scar. Another one to add to the list. I sat back on my heels and opened the lid. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, the velvet lining was undisturbed, and resting there beneath a layer of old letters were the bonds. Megan thought she was throwing away trash. She thought she was clearing out old sentimental clutter. She didn't know that she had just tossed $500,000 into the garbage. These were Series EE savings bonds and bearer bonds I had bought decades ago, back when I was a young engineer making good money and looking for a safe place to store it for the future. I had bought them for us, for our retirement. Then after Carolyn died, I kept them for the grandchildren I hoped to have. I kept them in this box because it was the one place I knew was safe. It was the box I made for the woman I trusted with my life. I stared at the paper certificates. They were crisp, official, and worth more than the equity in the house Bradley was trying to steal. $500,000. Tax-free. Untraceable to anyone who didn't know they existed. Megan was so blinded by her hatred of the past, so obsessed with her modern aesthetic, that she hadn't even bothered to open the lid. Her arrogance had cost her $500,000. She had literally thrown away her future because she couldn't see the value in my past. I closed the box. The latch clicked. It was the sound of a vault locking. I stood up, clutching the box and the wedding photo. I left the rest in the bag. The broken porcelain, the yearbooks. They were just things. The memories were in my head. But the box was power, and the photo was my conscience. I tied the bag back up. I left it exactly where she had put it. Let her think she had won. Let her think she had successfully erased me. I walked back into the house, locking the door silently behind me. I went to my room and opened my suitcase. I moved the stack of undershirts Megan had packed, the cheap ones, and placed the oak box at the very bottom. I cushioned it with my socks. Then I placed the wedding photo on top of it, face down, protecting it. I looked at the time. 3:15. The sun would be up in 3 hours. The notary would open in 4. The taxi would be here in 5. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the empty space on the wall where the photo used to be. It looked like a missing tooth. It looked ugly. But as I stared at the blank spot, a calm settled over me. It was the calm of a demolition expert who has just wired the final charge. I wasn't sad anymore. The grief had been burned away by the sheer audacity of her cruelty. She called my life trash. She threw my wife into the garbage. Fine. If she wanted to treat me like garbage, she was about to find out what happens when you leave volatile materials out in the sun. Spontaneous combustion. I lay back down, pulling the quilt up to my chin. I held my bleeding finger, letting the sting keep me sharp. I wouldn't sleep. I would lie here and visualize the collapse. I would imagine the look on her face when she realized that the trash she threw out was the only life raft she had. The house creaked again. But this time it didn't sound like it was settling. It sounded like it was groaning under the weight of the lies inside it. It sounded like it was ready to break, and I was the only one who knew where the cracks were. Tomorrow, I whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow, we take out the trash. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when the first luxury cars began to pull into the driveway. I watched from the window of my bedroom, a prisoner in my own home, as the vultures arrived to feast on the carcass of my life before I was even dead. Bradley had called it a farewell party. He told me it was a celebration of my retirement, a chance for his friends and colleagues to wish me a bon voyage. But as I watched the men in $5,000 suits and the women with frozen foreheads step out of their Porsches and Teslas, I knew the truth. This was not a party. This was an open house. I adjusted my tie in the mirror. It was an old silk tie, slightly frayed at the knot, the kind of thing Megan would call vintage if she were selling it, and garbage if I was wearing it. I smoothed my jacket, checking the pocket where I had stashed the recorder. It was running. The battery was full. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the expensive catering that had been wafting under my door for the last hour. Truffle oil and desperation. I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. The transformation was startling. My home, usually quiet and somewhat dusty in the corners Megan ignored, had been staged. The lighting was dimmed to a golden hue that hid the scuffs on the floorboards. A jazz playlist floated through the air, smooth and generic. Waiters in black vests were circulating with trays of champagne. It looked like a brochure for a life Bradley couldn't afford. I walked toward the living room, my steps slow and deliberate. I needed to play the part. The doddering old man. The grateful father. But beneath the act, my mind was calculating stress loads and breaking points. Bradley spotted me instantly. He was standing near the fireplace holding a crystal tumbler of scotch, laughing too loudly at something a heavy-set man in a charcoal suit had said. When his eyes landed on me, his smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a glitch in the matrix before stretching back into place. He excused himself and rushed over, intercepting me before I could reach the guests. "Dad," he hissed, gripping my elbow with a force that was meant to look affectionate but felt like a vice. "You are up. You look decent. Keep the jacket buttoned. It hides the stain on your shirt." There was no stain. It was a power play. "Who are all these people, Bradley?" I asked, making my voice sound thin and confused. "I thought it was just family." Bradley laughed, guiding me further into the room. "These are my partners, Dad. Important people. The kind of people who make things happen. I wanted them to meet the man who started it all. Just do me a favor. Do not talk about your bowel movements. Do not talk about the leaks in the basement. And for God's sake, do not mention the coffee incident. Just smile, say thank you, and talk about the whales. Everyone loves whales." He steered me toward the heavy-set man by the fireplace. "Mr. Cross," Bradley said, his voice booming with false pride. "I would like you to meet my father, Tobias King, the man of the hour. Dad, this is Mr. Cross. He is looking to invest in our next big venture." Cross turned to me. He had eyes like a shark, dead and black, assessing my value in a single glance. He shook my hand. His grip was wet and limp. "A pleasure," Mr. King, Cross said. "Your son tells me you are off to the great white north. A permanent vacation, I hear." I smiled, a slow, senile curling of the lips. "Permanent is a strong word, Mr. Cross," I said. "But yes, my son has been very generous. He bought me a one-way ticket. He insists I do not need to worry about coming back. He says he has everything under control here." Bradley stiffened beside me. He laughed nervously. "Dad loves to joke," Bradley said quickly. "He means he is going to relax so much he won't want to come back." "Right, Dad," I looked at Bradley, then at Cross. "Oh, Bradley is very efficient," I said. "He packed my bags himself. He even sealed them with tape so I wouldn't have to worry about things falling out. He is very thorough when he wants to get rid of clutter." Cross chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. He didn't catch the double meaning. "He just saw an old man rambling." "Wonderful," Cross said. "Bradley tells me this house has been in the family for decades. It is a magnificent property. The foundation alone must be worth a fortune in this market." I perked up. Foundation. That was my language. "The foundation is interesting," I said, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "You know, when I bought this place, the soil report showed deep shifting sands. I had to reinforce the concrete with steel rebar myself. It looks solid from the outside, doesn't it? But you have to be careful. If you don't know what is holding it up, the whole thing can collapse overnight." Bradley's hand tightened on my shoulder. "Dad is an engineer." Bradley interrupted, his voice tight. "He loves to bore people with technical details. The house is rock solid, Cross. I had it appraised last week. It is the perfect collateral for the loan package we discussed. Collateral. The word hung in the air. Bradley had just admitted it. He was using my house, the house he didn't own yet, to secure a loan from this man. Collateral. I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. That is a serious word. It means you have to give something up if you fail. My son is very brave, Mr. Cross. He is willing to gamble everything, even things that aren't technically his to gamble. Bradley choked on his scotch. He started coughing, turning red. What Dad means, Bradley wheezed, pounding his chest, is that he is proud I am taking the reins. He knows I treat his legacy with respect. Megan appeared out of nowhere, sensing the disturbance in the force. She was wearing a silver dress that shimmered like fish scales. She slid her arm through mine, her nails digging into my bicep. "Tobias," she exclaimed, her voice shrill. "There you are. Come, you must be hungry. The caterers made those little crab cakes you like. Let's get you some food. Over there. Far away." She tried to pull me away, but I planted my feet. I wasn't done with Mr. Cross. "In a minute, dear," I said, patting her hand. "I was just telling Mr. Cross about the house. He seems very interested in the structure." "I am," Cross said, looking around the room. "I was admiring the renovations. Bradley says you are planning to modernize the study." "Oh yes," Megan said, her eyes flashing. "We are going to gut it. It is full of old junk right now. We are going to open it up. Make it breathe." "Gut it," I echoed. "Yes, that is the plan. Remove the history. Paint over the cracks. My son and his wife are experts at renovation. They believe that if you throw away the old things, the new things magically become paid for." Cross frowned, looking confused. Bradley stepped in, physically blocking me from the investor. "Dad." "You are tired," Bradley said firmly. "You are rambling. Go sit down." I looked at Bradley. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. He was terrified. He was trying to sell a stolen car while the owner was sitting in the back seat. "I am not tired, son," I said clearly. "I am just observant. You know, Mr. Cross, my son is a very talented businessman. He reminds me of a magician." "A magician?" Cross asked, amused. "Yes," I said. "He knows how to make money disappear. And now he is trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat, or perhaps a house out of a trust." Bradley's face went white. He grabbed my arm and practically dragged me away from the group. "Excuse us," he muttered to Cross. "Senior moment. Need to get his meds." He hauled me into the kitchen away from the guests. The kitchen was full of catering staff plating appetizers. Bradley didn't care. He shoved me against the refrigerator. "What the hell are you doing?" He hissed, his face inches from mine. "Are you trying to tank this deal? Cross is the liquidity provider. If he walks, we lose everything." I adjusted my glasses, looking at him with wide, innocent eyes. "I was just making conversation, Bradley. You told me to be friendly. I was just telling him how proud I am. You are selling the house to pay for my cruise, aren't you?" "That is what you said." Bradley looked like he wanted to strangle me. He looked around at the catering staff who were studiously ignoring us. "Just shut up," he whispered. "Sit in the corner, eat a shrimp, and do not speak to anyone else. If you say one more word about the foundation, or the trust, or anything other than bon voyage, I will put you in that taxi tonight and send you to a motel." He stormed back out to the party, smoothing his jacket as he went. I watched him go. He was crumbling. The pressure was getting to him. Good. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, watching the staff work. One of them, a young woman with a tray of champagne flutes, smiled at me sympathetically. "Can I get you anything, sir?" she asked. I smiled back. "A water, please. And maybe, do you know where the circuit breaker is? The lights seem a bit dim." She pointed to the pantry door. In there, sir. I nodded. Thank you. I waited until she left the room. I walked over to the pantry. I didn't touch the breakers. Not yet. That was too crude. Instead, I checked the inventory Megan had stocked for the party. Cases of expensive wine, caviar, things bought with credit cards that were about to be declined. I walked back out into the party. I didn't go to the corner. I went to the center of the room. Bradley was there holding court with Cross and two other men who looked like lawyers. They were laughing. Bradley was holding up his glass. To the future, Bradley shouted. To new assets and old debts paid off. The room cheered. Glasses clinked. I stepped forward. I tapped a spoon against my water glass. The sound was sharp and piercing. It cut through the jazz and the chatter. Ding, ding, ding. The room quieted. Bradley froze his glass halfway to his mouth. He looked at me with pure panic. I would like to make a toast, I said, my voice projecting with the authority of a site foreman. Megan started to rush toward me, but Mr. Cross held up a hand. Let the man speak, Cross said. It is his party after all. I smiled at Cross. Thank you. I looked around the room. I looked at the strangers drinking my wine. I looked at the furniture Megan had bought with my money. And then I looked at my son. To my son Bradley, I began. Bradley stared at me, his eyes pleading. Don't do it. Please don't do it. He has always been a dreamer, I continued. Even as a boy. He always wanted things he couldn't reach, and I always tried to give them to him. But tonight he has outdone himself. I gestured to the crystal chandelier hanging above us. It was a monstrosity of glass and gold, new and gaudy. Look at this light, I said. It is beautiful, isn't it? Bradley picked it out. He has such expensive taste. You know, folks, my son is so talented he sold his conscience to buy this chandelier. A ripple of uneasy laughter went through the room. People weren't sure if it was a joke or a senile rambling. But seriously, I went on, my voice hardening just a fraction. He is sending me on a trip tomorrow. A very long trip. He says it is for my health. He says I need to rest. And he is right. I have been carrying a heavy load for a long time. 35 years of load-bearing weight. I looked directly at Bradley. But tomorrow that weight is gone. Tomorrow I sail away. And my son inherits the earth. Or at least he thinks he does. So let's drink to that. To assumptions. And to the fine print. May you always read it before you sign. I raised my water glass. To the fine print, some people raised their glasses confused but polite. Cross looked thoughtful. He was looking at Bradley, who was pale and sweating profusely. Bradley downed his drink in one gulp. He forced a laugh that sounded like a bark. Classic Dad, he shouted. Always with the riddles. Okay, everyone, let's eat. Buffet is open. He rushed the guests toward the dining room, trying to create a stampede that would drown out my words. Megan grabbed my arm, her nails digging in so hard I knew it would leave bruises. You are done, she hissed in my ear. You are going to your room now. She dragged me toward the hallway. I didn't fight her. I had said what I needed to say. I had planted the seed. Cross was watching us. I saw him tracking the way Megan was manhandling me. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was wondering why the loving daughter-in-law was dragging the guest of honor away like a sack of potatoes. She shoved me into my room and slammed the door. I heard the lock click from the outside. They had locked me in. I sat on the bed and exhaled. My heart was racing, but I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had poked the bear. I had rattled the cage. Bradley was going to be a wreck tonight. He would be drinking more scotch to calm his nerves. He would be sloppy. I pulled out my phone. I had 3 new messages from Roth. Injunctions drafted. Sheriff confirmed for 07:45 a.m. Loan default notice ready for service. I smiled. The cavalry was coming. I could hear the party continuing through the door. The music was louder now, trying to cover the tension. I heard Bradley's voice, high and manic, trying to close the deal. He was promising them the world. He was promising them my house. I looked at the suitcase in the corner. The oak box was safe inside. The wedding photo was safe. Let them party, I thought. Let them dance on the deck of the Titanic. They didn't see the iceberg. I was the iceberg. I lay back on the pillows and closed my eyes. I needed to rest. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. I had an eviction to supervise. And I wanted to be well rested when I watched the look on Bradley's face as the walls came tumbling down. The music thumped. The laughter drifted in. But all I heard was the ticking of the clock. 11 hours. Just 11 hours until the sunrise. I fell asleep to the sound of my son selling a future he would never have. The lock on my bedroom door clicked open at 6:30 in the morning. I was already awake, sitting in the armchair by the window, dressed in the travel clothes they had laid out for me. A beige cardigan that smelled like mothballs and gray slacks that were 2 inches too short. It was the uniform of the elderly and forgotten, chosen specifically by Megan to make me look frail. I smoothed the fabric over my knees, feeling the hard outline of the burner phone in my sock. It was the only weapon I had left, and it was fully charged. Bradley burst into the room. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles that stood out against his pale, clammy skin. He was wearing the same shirt from the party, wrinkled and stained with sweat. The smell of stale scotch and panic rolled off him in waves. "Up, Dad," he barked, not even looking at me. "Taxi is 5 minutes out. We have to move." He didn't ask how I slept. He didn't ask if I was hungry. He just grabbed the handle of my suitcase, the one with the oak box and the bonds hidden inside, and yanked it toward the door. The wheels squeaked in protest. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the cane I didn't actually need. "Good morning, son," I said, my voice raspy. "Is it time I didn't hear the alarm?" "We don't need an alarm," Bradley snapped, hoisting the second bag onto his shoulder. "We have a schedule, and we are already behind." "Megan!" He shouted into the hallway. Megan appeared a second later. She looked worse than him. Her makeup was smeared and her hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun. She was holding a travel mug of coffee and the new power of attorney document. It was crisp, fresh, and stamped with a seal that looked suspicious even from a distance. "Here," she said, shoving the coffee at me. "Drink. It has your meds in it." I took the cup. I didn't drink it. I pretended to sip, letting the liquid barely touch my lips before pulling it away. I knew what was in there. Probably enough sedatives to knock out a horse. They wanted me pliable for the ride. They wanted me to be a drooling mess by the time I reached the gangway, so the ship's doctor would just wave me through as a senile dependent. "The notary opens in 20 minutes, Bradley said, checking his watch. "We are going to stop there on the way to the port. You are going to run in, sign the book, sign the paper, and then we go. No coffee spills, no shaking hands. Do you hear me?" I nodded, looking down at my shoes. "Yes, Bradley. Whatever you say. I just want to get on the boat." "Good," he grunted. "Let's go." They flanked me like prison guards escorting an inmate to the electric chair. Bradley on my left, Megan on my right. They each took an elbow and marched me down the hallway. I looked at the bare walls where the photos used to be. The pale rectangles of unfaded paint looked like tombstones marking where my memories had died. We reached the living room. The remnants of the party were still there. Half-empty glasses on the mantelpiece. A stain on the rug where someone had dropped a canapé. The house felt dirty. It felt used. It felt like a crime scene that hadn't been taped off yet. The sound of a car horn honking cut through the morning air. 2 short blasts. "Taxi is here," Megan said, her voice jumping with excitement. "Oh, thank God." Finally. She practically ran to the front door and threw it open. The morning air rushed in cold and damp, smelling of the Puget Sound and impending rain. A yellow cab was idling at the curb, its exhaust puffing white clouds into the gray sky. The driver, a man in a turban who looked bored, popped the trunk. Bradley dragged the suitcases out to the porch. He didn't carry them. He dragged them, letting the expensive leather scrape against the brick steps. He hauled them down the walkway and threw them into the trunk of the taxi. "Get in, Dad," Bradley yelled from the sidewalk. "Come on, chop chop." I walked to the threshold of the front door. I stopped. My hand rested on the doorframe. The wood was cold and smooth. I had sanded this frame myself 20 years ago. I had painted it a deep forest green because Carolyn said it was good luck. Now the paint was chipping where Megan had slammed the door too many times. "Move it, Tobias!" Megan hissed, pushing me from behind. "We don't have time for sentimental garbage." I planted my feet. I turned around slowly. I looked at the living room one last time. I looked at the spot where Caroline used to sit and read. I looked at the kitchen where we had cooked Thanksgiving dinners. I looked at the stairs Bradley had fallen down when he was 4, and the wall where I had marked his height every birthday. It wasn't a look of longing. It wasn't a look of sadness. It was an inspection. I was checking the structural integrity of the memory one last time before the demolition. I was memorizing the layout so I would know exactly how to rebuild it once the squatters were gone. "Dad," Bradley shouted, running back up the walkway. "What are you doing?" "Get in the car." I looked at him. I looked him dead in the eye. For a second, I let the mask slip. I let the confusion fade from my face. I stood tall, my shoulders squaring, my jaw setting. I looked at him not as a father looks at a son, but as a judge looks at a defendant. "I am just saying goodbye, Bradley." I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. "You know what they say. You can never really go home again, especially once you have burned it down." Bradley blinked. He stepped back, unsure of what he had just seen. For a moment he saw the engineer. He saw the man who calculated load bearings for a living. "What?" he stammered. "What did you say?" I let my shoulders slump again. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I blinked rapidly, looking confused. I said, "Did I turn off the stove?" I worried. "I think I left the kettle on." Bradley let out a groan of frustration. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the bruise he had left yesterday. "The stove is off, Dad. Everything is off. Get in the damn car." He shoved me toward the taxi. Megan was already in the front seat, tapping furiously on her phone, probably transferring funds she didn't have access to yet. I let him guide me to the back seat. I slid in. The vinyl seat was cold. The car smelled of pine air freshener and stale cigarettes. Bradley slammed the door shut. It sounded like a cell door closing. He ran around to the other side and jumped in next to me. "Go," he told the driver. "The Port of Seattle. And stop at the Notary on 4th and Main. Step on it." The driver nodded and pulled the car into gear. We rolled away from the curb. I looked out the window. I watched my house disappear behind the hedge. I saw the recycling bin at the end of the driveway, the lid slightly open, revealing the black plastic bag Megan had dragged out last night. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was in the box, shipped and handled. They were giddy with it. Megan turned around in her seat, grinning at Bradley. "We did it," she mouthed. Bradley let out a long exhale, loosening his tie. He pulled the flask from his jacket pocket and took a long swig. "Smooth sailing from here, Dad," he said, patting my knee. "Just smooth sailing." I didn't answer. I just stared straight ahead, watching the road. I wasn't looking at the scenery. I was looking for a black sedan. I was looking for the sheriff. I checked my watch discreetly. It was 7:45. Roth was never late. The taxi turned the corner at the end of the block, and there it was. Blocking the road parked sideways across both lanes was a sleek, black Lincoln town car. And leaning against the hood, looking like the Grim Reaper in a three-piece suit, was Mr. Roth. Next to him stood a man in a beige uniform with a star on his chest. The taxi driver slammed on the brakes. We skidded to a halt, the tires screeching against the wet pavement. "What the hell?" the driver yelled. Bradley was thrown forward against the seat. He spilled his flask. "What is going on?" Bradley shouted. "Why are they blocking the road?" "Go around them, drive on the lawn." I sat back in my seat. I crossed my legs. I dusted a piece of lint off my beige cardigan. "You can't go around them, son," I said, my voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of senility. Bradley turned to look at me. His eyes were wide, confused. "Why?" he asked. "Who are they?" I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who had finally trapped the hunter. "That is the welcoming committee, Bradley, and I believe they are here for you." The taxi driver was swearing a colorful stream of curses as he gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. The smell of burnt rubber filled the cabin, mixing with the stale scent of pine air freshener and Bradley's fierce sweat. We were stopped dead in the middle of the street, the black Lincoln town car blocking our path like a monolith. "Get out of the way!" Bradley screamed, pounding on the plexiglass divider. "What are you doing? Honk at them, ram them if you have to." "We have a schedule." The driver ignored him. He was staring down the barrel of authority. The man in the beige uniform stepping out of the passenger side of the Lincoln wasn't just a security guard. He was the county sheriff. And the man stepping out of the back seat, adjusting his cufflinks with the calm precision of a surgeon, was Mr. Roth. I watched Roth through the windshield. He looked exactly the same as he did 10 years ago. Tall, skeletal, wearing a suit that cost more than the taxi we were sitting in. He didn't look like a lawyer who saved people. He looked like a lawyer who buried them. "Open the door," I said to the driver. My voice was low, but in the sudden silence of the cabin it sounded like a gavel striking wood. The driver unlocked the doors instantly. "Dad, stay in the car," Bradley ordered, his voice cracking. He reached for my arm, but he missed. I was already moving. I opened the door and stepped out onto the damp pavement. The morning air was crisp and cold, biting at my face, waking up every nerve ending I had suppressed for the last week. I took a deep breath. It tasted like rain and victory. Bradley scrambled out of the other side of the taxi, nearly tripping over his own feet. Megan followed him, her heels clicking frantically on the asphalt. "Who are these people?" Megan hissed, pulling her cardigan tight around her. "Bradley, handle this. We are going to miss the check-in window." Bradley marched toward Roth, puffing out his chest, trying to summon the arrogance that had gotten him through life so far. "Hey! You can't just block the road," Bradley shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Roth. "My father is an elderly man. He has a medical condition. You are upsetting him. I am calling the police." Roth didn't even blink. He simply tilted his head toward the sheriff standing next to him. The sheriff rested his hand on his belt, his expression bored but watchful. "I believe the police are already here," Mr. King, Roth said. His voice was like dry leaves scraping over concrete. "And as for your father's medical condition, I would say his prognosis has improved remarkably in the last 5 minutes." Bradley stopped. He looked from Roth to the sheriff, then back to the taxi where I was standing. He looked confused. He looked like a man trying to read a map in a language he didn't speak. "Who are you?" Bradley demanded. "I am Tobias King's legal counsel," Roth said smoothly. "And I am here to serve you with a restraining order and an immediate eviction notice." Megan let out a sound like a deflating tire. "Eviction? What are you talking about? We live there. We are taking care of him." Roth reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He held it out, not to Bradley, but to me. "Good morning, Tobias," Roth said. "The protocol is active. The assets are frozen. The locks are being changed as we speak. I walked toward them. I didn't shuffle. I didn't use the cane. I left it leaning against the taxi, a prop in a play that had just closed its curtains. I walked with the long, confident strides of the man who had overseen the construction of the mesmerizing skyline behind us. I took the paper from Roth. I didn't look at it. I knew what it said. I looked at Bradley. My son's mouth was hanging open. He was staring at me as if I had just grown a second head. He was looking for the tremor in my hands. He was looking for the cloudy, confused eyes. He found neither. "Dad," he whispered. "What? What is happening? Why are you standing like that?" I reached into the inside pocket of my beige cardigan. Bradley flinched, perhaps thinking I was reaching for a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out the envelope he had given me yesterday. The glossy, expensive envelope containing the ticket to Alaska. The ticket to my exile. I held it up so he could see it. The morning light caught the gold foil lettering. Royal Alaska Cruise Line. "You gave me this, Bradley," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when I had to tell a contractor that his concrete pour was substandard and had to be ripped out. "You told me it was a gift. You told me it was for my health." Bradley swallowed hard. "It is, Dad. It is a gift. We just want you to relax." I nodded slowly. "You wanted me to go on a trip," I said. "You wanted me to sail away into the sunset so you could strip the copper wiring out of my life. You wanted a one-way ticket." I ripped the envelope in half. The sound was loud in the quiet street. Megan gasped. The taxi driver leaning out his window watched with wide eyes. I put the two halves together and ripped them again and again. I turned the ticket into confetti. I opened my hand and let the pieces fall. The wind caught them, scattering them across the wet asphalt like dirty snow. "I am not going anywhere, Bradley," I said. Bradley looked at the pieces of paper on the ground. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at Roth. And then he looked at me. And for the first time, he really saw me. He saw the anger. He saw the intelligence. He saw the trap closing. "But the house," Bradley stammered. "The loan. Mr. Cross, I promised him." "You promised him collateral you do not own," I cut him off. "You promised him a house that belongs to a trust that just revoked your beneficiary status 5 minutes ago." Megan stepped forward, her face twisted in a mask of fury. "You senile old bat," she screamed. "You don't know what you are doing. You signed the papers." "We have witnesses. You are confused." Roth stepped forward, smooth as a viper. "Mrs. King, I would advise you to lower your voice. The sheriff is currently holding a warrant for your arrest regarding the fraudulent credit card applications and the theft of property. Specifically, the jewelry you attempted to pawn last week. We have the surveillance footage." Megan's mouth snapped shut. She went pale, her hands clutching her purse as if she could hide the evidence inside. Bradley turned to me, his eyes filling with tears. They were the same fake tears he had used yesterday, but now they were edged with real terror. "Dad, please," he begged. "You can't do this. I am your son. I am in trouble. Serious trouble. If I don't get that loan, if I don't get the house, these people, they will kill me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had looked me in the eye and lied about loving me. I looked at the man who had tried to drug me with coffee just 12 hours ago. I reached into my other pocket. I pulled out another envelope. This one wasn't glossy. It was plain white legal stationery. "I didn't buy a ticket for myself, Bradley," I said. "I bought a ticket for you." I held it out to him. He took it with shaking hands. He opened it. It wasn't a cruise ticket. It was a bus ticket. A one-way bus ticket to a town 3 states over where I knew there was a halfway house that took in charity cases. And inside the envelope behind the ticket was a copy of the default notice on the angel investor loan. The loan he thought he had with a Hong Kong bank. The loan he actually had with me. "You are right, son," I said softly. "You are in trouble. You are in default. And as the primary lender on your business loan, I am calling in the debt. Immediately." Bradley stared at the paper. He read the name of the lender. King Holdings LLC. "You," he whispered. "It was you the whole time. I was the safety net, Bradley," I said. "I was the floor you were standing on, and you tried to tear me up with a crowbar." I took a step closer to him. I leaned in just like he had leaned in to threaten me at the dinner table. "I am not going to Alaska," I said, my voice cold as the glacier he wanted me to see. "I am going back to my house. I am going to sit in my chair, and I am going to watch the football game." I pointed at the sheriff. "But you are going on a trip. You and Megan. The sheriff is going to escort you off the premises. You have 1 hour to remove your personal effects from my property. Anything left after 60 minutes goes into the trash, just like you did with your mother's photos." Megan lunged at me. "You old bastard!" The sheriff moved faster than a man his size should. He stepped between us, his hand resting on his holster. "Ma'am, step back," the sheriff ordered, "or you will be leaving in the back of my car, not the taxi." Megan froze. She looked at Bradley, waiting for him to fix it, waiting for him to spin a lie to charm his way out. But Bradley was broken. He was staring at the torn pieces of the cruise ticket on the ground, realizing that the only thing that had sailed was his life. I turned to Roth. "Mr. Roth, please ensure the locks are changed by noon. And cancel the internet. I don't want them using my Wi-Fi to look for a divorce lawyer." "Consider it done, Tobias," Roth said, a rare thin smile touching his lips. I turned back to the taxi driver who was watching the scene with popcorn-eating intensity. "Driver," I said, "take me home." "But—" "The gentleman," the driver asked, pointing at Bradley. "The gentleman is not coming," I said. "He has missed the boat." I got back into the taxi. I slammed the door. I didn't look back at them. I didn't look at my son crying in the street, or my daughter-in-law screaming at a lawyer. I looked forward. The taxi made a U-turn, the tires crunching over the confetti of the cruise ticket. As we drove away, leaving them standing in the cold morning mist with the police, I felt a weight lift off my chest. It was the weight of a 20-year lie. The lie that I could save him. I rolled down the window and let the cold air hit my face. It felt good. It felt like freedom. I wasn't going to Alaska. I was going home. And for the first time in a long time, it was actually going to be mine. The silence on the street was absolute, broken only by the distant wail of a siren that seemed to be getting closer, a fitting soundtrack for the dismantling of my son's life. Bradley stood on the wet pavement, the bus ticket to nowhere fluttering in his hand like a dead leaf. He looked at the paper, then at me, his eyes darting back and forth, as if trying to find the punchline to a joke he didn't understand. But this wasn't a joke. This was an audit. Mr. Roth stepped forward, his Italian leather shoes making a crisp sound on the asphalt. He opened the leather binder he had been holding under his arm. It was thick, filled with the paperwork that represented the structural demolition of Bradley's existence. Roth didn't look at Bradley with pity. He looked at him with the boredom of an executioner who had a lunch reservation to get to. Mr. Bradley King Roth began, his voice projecting clearly in the morning air. "We need to discuss the matter of the residence at 442 Skyline Drive. Specifically, your unauthorized attempt to leverage said property as collateral for a high-risk loan with Mr. Cross and his associates." Bradley blinked, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. I haven't signed anything yet," Bradley stammered. "It was just a conversation. You can't evict me for a conversation. And anyway, Dad said the house was mine. He said he was leaving it to me." "That is a verbal contract." I shook my head slowly. "I never said it was your son. I said you could live there. There is a difference. A difference you would know if you had ever paid a mortgage in your life. Roth flipped a page in his binder. The sound was sharp like a whip crack. Regarding the verbal contract, Roth said, dismissing the idea with a wave of his hand. It is irrelevant. The property is held in the Tobias King Irrevocable Trust. You are listed as a beneficiary contingent upon certain behavioral clauses. Specifically, Clause 14b, regarding the protection of assets. Roth pulled a sheet of paper from the binder and held it up. Clause 14b states that any beneficiary who attempts to encumber mortgage or lien trust assets without the written consent of the trustee, that being your father, automatically forfeits their beneficiary status. By presenting the house as collateral to Mr. Cross, you committed fraud against the trust. Bradley took a step back, shaking his head. No. No, that is legal mumbo-jumbo. You can't just take my inheritance. I am his son. You were a beneficiary. Roth corrected him, cold as ice. Past tense. As of 8:00 a.m. this morning, when I filed the motion with the county clerk, you have been removed from the trust. You have no claim to the house. You have no claim to the estate. You are, legally speaking, a stranger to this property. Megan, who had been frozen in shock near the taxi, suddenly came to life. The word inheritance had triggered her survival instinct. She lunged forward, her face twisted into a mask of pure entitlement. You can't do that, she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. We have rights. We have lived there for 6 months. That establishes tenancy. You have to give us 30 days' notice. You have to go through the courts. We aren't going anywhere. She turned to the sheriff, putting on her best victim face, tears springing to her eyes on command. Officer, this man is trying to throw us on the street illegally. We live there. My clothes are there. You have to stop him. The sheriff didn't move. He adjusted his belt, looking at Megan with a flat, unimpressed stare. Ma'am, he said, his voice deep and rumbling. I am not here to stop an eviction. I am here to enforce a restraining order and a criminal trespass warning. Megan's jaw dropped. Criminal trespass. We have a key, Roth interjected smoothly. You had a key, Mrs. King, but as your husband just learned, his right to reside in the home was contingent on his standing with the trust. That standing has been revoked. Furthermore, since you have been using Mr. King's credit cards without authorization to fund your lifestyle, your presence in the home is no longer that of a guest. It is that of an intruder who is actively stealing from the homeowner. Stealing? Megan shrieked. I was buying groceries. I was buying things for the house. Roth pulled another paper. A credit card statement. He held it up. $4,000 at Nordstrom, Roth read. $2,000 at the Diamond Spa. $600 at a sushi restaurant in downtown Seattle, while Mr. King was eating leftovers at home. That doesn't look like groceries, Mrs. King. That looks like grand larceny. Megan went pale. She looked at Bradley, waiting for him to defend her, but Bradley was staring at his feet, defeated. So the sheriff continued, stepping forward. Here is how this works. Mr. King has granted you a 1-hour grace period to remove your personal effects. That means clothes and toiletries. No furniture, no electronics, no artwork, and definitely no jewelry that doesn't have a receipt with your name on it. 1 hour, Megan gasped. I can't pack in 1 hour. I have a wardrobe, I have shoes. Then you better start moving, the sheriff said, checking his watch. The clock started 5 minutes ago. If you are not off the property by 9:00 a.m., you will be arrested for trespassing. And ma'am, if I find one single item belonging to Miss King in your bags, I will add theft to the charges. Megan looked at the house, then at the sheriff, then at me. She let out a scream of frustration, a primal sound of a predator that had just realized it was prey. She spun around and ran toward the house, her heels clacking frantically on the driveway. She knew the game was up. She was going to grab what she could. Bradley didn't run. He just stood there, looking at the bus ticket in his hand. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. Dad, he whispered. The company. My business. I can't. I can't lose the house. I used the company credit line to pay the deposit on the new office. If I lose the collateral, the bank will call the loan. I will go bankrupt. I looked at him. I remembered the day he started his company. I had given him the seed money. I had introduced him to his first clients. I had built the foundation he was standing on. You are already bankrupt, Bradley, I said softly. You just haven't checked your phone yet. Bradley frowned. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He tapped the screen. I saw his brow furrow. He tapped again harder. What? He muttered. Then a notification chime pinged. It was loud in the quiet street. Then another, and another. A cascade of digital alerts. Bradley stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. He looked like he was going to be sick. My cards, he whispered. They are all declined. The company account. It is locked. Access denied. Dad, what did you do? I didn't do anything, Bradley, I said. King Holdings LLC did it. Bradley looked up, confusion warring with horror. King Holdings. That is the angel investor. That is the Hong Kong group. I stepped closer to him. There is no Hong Kong group, son. It is me. It has always been me. I am King Holdings. I lent you the money. I held the note. And the terms of that loan stated clearly that if you engaged in any criminal activity or attempted to defraud the lender, the loan would be in default immediately. Bradley shook his head, backing away. No, that is impossible. You are just a retired engineer. You fix bridges. You don't run a private equity firm. I fixed bridges so people like you could cross them, I said. And I saved my money so I could build a legacy. I thought that legacy was you. But I was wrong. You were just a sinkhole. I signaled to Roth. Mr. Roth executed the default clause this morning, I explained. We seized the corporate accounts to cover the debt. We seized the assets. The car you are driving. The lease is in the company name. It is not your car anymore. It is my car. Bradley looked at the Tesla parked in the driveway. The car he loved more than he loved his wife. You took my car, he choked out. I took my collateral, I corrected. You can take the bus. That is why I gave you the ticket. Bradley dropped his phone. It hit the pavement with a crack. He didn't pick it up. He fell to his knees right there in the street. He put his head in his hands and started to sob. It wasn't a cry of remorse. It was the cry of a child who had been told playtime was over. How am I going to live? He wailed. I have nothing. I have nowhere to go. I looked down at him. I felt a twinge of pain, the ghost of the love I used to have for him. But then I remembered the coffee stain on the floor. I remembered the trash bag full of Carolyn's photos. I remembered the one-way ticket to Alaska. You have your health, I said coldly. You have 2 hands. You can work. I hear they are hiring down at the docks. Hard labor. Good for the soul. I turned my back on him. I couldn't look at him anymore. He was a ruin. A condemned building. I walked up the driveway toward my house. The sheriff followed me. Roth stayed behind to supervise the seizure of the vehicle. I heard him on the phone calling a tow truck. I walked up the steps to the front porch. The door was open where Megan had run inside. I stepped into the hallway. It was chaos. Megan was running back and forth from the bedroom to the living room, throwing clothes into garbage bags. She was screaming curses, throwing hangers on the floor. She was stripping the house like a locust. She saw me standing in the doorway and stopped. She was holding a silver vase, one of the few things of value left in the living room. Put it down, Megan, I said. She clutched the vase to her chest. It is mine. You gave it to us for Christmas. I gave it to the couple who lived here, I said. That couple doesn't exist anymore. Put it down, or the sheriff will add it to the evidence list. The sheriff stepped into the hallway, his presence filling the space. He didn't say a word. He just looked at the vase, then at Megan's hands. She screamed a sound of pure frustration and threw the vase onto the sofa. It bounced harmlessly onto a cushion. "I hate you," she yelled. "I hope you die alone in this big empty house." I smiled. It was a genuine smile. "I won't be alone, Megan. I will have my memories. And I will have my peace. Something you will never have because you will always be looking for the next person to use." She grabbed her bags, 2 black plastic sacks filled with designer clothes she could no longer afford to dry clean. She dragged them toward the door, shoving past me. "Move, old man," she spat. I stepped aside. I let her pass. I watched her drag her life out onto the porch. Bradley was still on his knees in the driveway. Megan didn't stop to help him. She didn't comfort him. She walked right past him, dragging her bags toward the street. "Get up, Bradley," she yelled at him. "Call an Uber. We are going to my mother's." Bradley looked up at her, his face streaked with tears. "My mom hates me," he whispered. "Then we are going to a motel. Just get up, you are pathetic." She kept walking. She left him there. She didn't care about him. She only cared that the ride was over. I watched them go. The sheriff stood beside me on the porch. "Do you want me to stay until the locksmith gets here, Mr. King?" the sheriff asked. "No, Sheriff," I said. "Mr. Roth can handle it. I think I am going to make some coffee." The sheriff nodded. He tipped his hat. "Good luck, Mr. King." I watched him walk down the driveway to his car. I watched the tow truck pull up and hook the Tesla. I watched Bradley finally stand up, pick up his bus ticket, and start walking down the street, trailing behind his wife like a lost puppy. I closed the front door. The sound was solid, heavy, final. I locked it. I turned around and looked at my house. It was messy. There were garbage bags in the hallway. There was a coffee stain on the dining room rug. The walls were bare. But the air was different. It was lighter. The toxic pressure was gone. I walked into the kitchen. I filled the kettle. I put it on the stove. I listened to the water heat up. I was 67 years old. I had a house that was paid for. I had a fortune in the bank. And I had the rest of my life. I walked to the living room window and looked out at the view Megan had coveted so much. The Seattle skyline rose in the distance, gray and steel against the clouds. It was beautiful. I wasn't going to Alaska. I was right where I belonged. And for the first time in a long time, the foundation felt solid. I stood at the bay window of my living room. The one Megan had complained was drafty and outdated. I held a mug of fresh hot coffee in my hand, the steam rising against the glass. Outside, the drama was unfolding on the sidewalk, with the kind of poetic justice that usually only exists in fiction. But this was real, and it was spectacular. Bradley and Megan were standing on the curb surrounded by 4 black plastic garbage bags. The irony was so sharp it could cut diamonds. Those were the exact same heavy-duty contractor bags Megan had used the night before to throw away my wife's photo albums and my oak box. Now those bags contained her entire wardrobe. Her designer shoes were jumbled together with her hair dryers and her skincare products, all shoved into plastic sacks that smelled of desperation. They looked like refugees from a reality show that had been canceled mid-season. Bradley was pacing back and forth, his tie undone, his expensive Italian loafers scuffing against the concrete. He was frantically tapping on his phone, trying to make a call. I saw him hold the device up to the sky as if searching for a signal that would save him. But the only signal he was going to get was a busy tone. I had already cut the family plan. Then his phone rang. I could hear the shrill tone even through the double-paned glass. Bradley grabbed it with both hands, answering it like it was a lifeline. "Mr. Cross," I saw him shout, his voice thin and hysterical. "Thank God you called." Listen, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. My father, he is having a breakdown. He is confused. The collateral is safe. I just need a few days to sort out the paperwork." He stopped. He pulled the phone away from his ear, wincing. Even from 20 yards away, I could hear the screaming on the other end of the line. Mr. Cross wasn't calling to check in. He was calling to declare war. Bradley put the phone back to his ear, his face draining of color until he looked like a sheet of paper. "Fraud," he squeaked. No, it is not fraud. It is a family dispute. You can't sue me. The liquidity is tied up in—" He stopped again. He listened. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed a street lamp to hold himself up. "The police," Bradley whispered. "But we had a deal. I bought the champagne." He lowered the phone slowly. The call had ended. He stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the red button. He looked like a man who had just been told he had 24 hours to live. Megan, who had been sitting on one of the garbage bags, filing a broken nail, stood up. She walked over to him, her eyes narrowing. She smelled blood in the water. "Who was that?" she demanded. "Was that the investor?" "Did he transfer the funds?" Bradley looked at her. He looked terrified. He is pulling out," Bradley stammered. "He says he called the county clerk this morning. He knows I am not on the deed. He says I misrepresented my assets. He is filing a lawsuit, Megan, for fraud. He is calling the district attorney." Megan stared at him. Her face didn't crumble. It hardened. It turned into a mask of pure, unadulterated contempt. "The district attorney," she repeated, her voice rising to a shriek. "You told me the deal was done. You told me the house was ours. You told me your father was a vegetable who wouldn't notice a thing. He tricked us," Bradley yelled back, pointing at the house, pointing at me, standing in the window. "He set us up. He is the lender, Megan. He owns the company debt. He owns everything." Megan slapped him. It was a sharp, cracking sound that echoed down the quiet suburban street. It was the sound of an alliance shattering. "You useless idiot," she screamed. "You told me you were a businessman. You told me you were a partner. You are nothing. You are a 40-year-old man living on an allowance from his daddy. And now you have lost that too." "I tried," Bradley whined, holding his cheek. "I did everything you said. I got the papers. I booked the cruise. It was your idea to throw out his stuff. That is what set him off, my idea." Megan laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Oh, do not pin this on me. You are the one who gambled the company credit line. You are the one who owes money to people who break legs for a living. I was trying to save us. I was trying to get us a liquid asset before you ended up in a ditch." She turned away from him, pulling her phone out of her pocket. She started typing furiously. "Who are you calling?" Bradley asked, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Is it a lawyer? Do you know a criminal defense guy?" "I am calling an Uber." Megan spat, not looking up. "An Uber." Bradley asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Okay. Good. We can go to a hotel. We can regroup. I have a few watches I can sell. We can get some cash." Megan interrupted him. She looked up from her phone, her eyes cold as ice. "There is no we, Bradley. I am going to my mother's house. Alone." Bradley stared at her. "But you can't leave me. I have nothing. He took my car. He took the cards." "I have a bus ticket, Megan." "A bus ticket? You have a bus ticket," she corrected him. "I have a future, and it does not involve visiting you in prison." She hit the button on her screen. "Your ride is 5 minutes away," she read aloud. "Correction, my ride." Bradley grabbed her arm. "You can't do this. We are married, in sickness and in health. For richer or poorer, we are poorer," Megan screamed, shaking him off. "We are destitute, and it is your fault. You lied to me about the money. You lied to me about the house. You lied to me about your father. You said he was weak. He just dismantled your entire life in 20 minutes without raising his voice. He isn't weak. You are. She kicked one of the garbage bags toward the curb. Help me move these, she ordered. Or I will tell the police about the time you forged his signature on the insurance checks last year. Bradley froze. The fight went out of him. He looked at the woman he had betrayed his father for. He saw the predator he had married, and he realized he was just another carcass she was done picking clean. He bent down and picked up the heavy black bags. He hauled them to the edge of the street, his back bent, his spirit broken. He looked like a servant. A silver Toyota Camry pulled up a few minutes later. The Uber sticker was in the window. The driver popped the trunk. Megan didn't help. She stood there checking her reflection in the car window, fixing her hair. Bradley loaded her bags into the trunk. He put every single one of them inside. When he was done, he stood by the open passenger door. He looked at Megan with puppy dog eyes. Megan, please, he whispered. I don't have anywhere to go. Just let me ride with you as far as downtown. Please. Megan looked at him. She looked at the house. She looked up at the window where I was standing. Our eyes locked for a second. She didn't look ashamed. She looked angry that she had lost. She looked back at Bradley. You have a ticket, she said. Use it. She got into the car and slammed the door. She didn't look back. The car pulled away, accelerating a little too fast, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. Bradley stood there on the curb. He was alone. The street was empty. The show was over. He looked down at his hands. He was holding the envelope I had given him, the plain white envelope. He opened it. He pulled out the bus ticket. He looked at the house one last time. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. Bon voyage, son. He dropped his head. He turned around and started walking. He walked past the neighbors who were peeking out from behind their curtains. He walked past the spot where he had parked his Tesla every night. He walked toward the main road, toward the bus stop, toward a life that was finally completely his own responsibility. I watched him until he turned the corner and disappeared. I turned away from the window. The coffee was still hot. The house was quiet. I walked into the kitchen and saw the mess on the floor where he had spilled the coffee the night before. I grabbed a mop. I started to clean. It was going to take some scrubbing to get the stain out, but I had time. I had all the time in the world. And for the first time in years, the dirt I was cleaning up wasn't buried under a rug. It was gone, and the floor beneath it was solid. The house was finally quiet. It was not the silence of a tomb, as Megan had described it, but the silence of a sanctuary. I had spent the last 2 hours reclaiming my territory inch by inch. The beige throw pillows Megan loved so much were currently sitting in the outdoor recycling bin. The abstract art that looked like spilled coffee had been taken down and leaned against the curb for the trash collectors. I had brought my old leather armchair back from the garage where they had banished it. I sat in it now, and the worn leather groaned a familiar welcoming sound that felt like a hug. On the coffee table sat the bottle of Dom Perignon they had opened yesterday, but barely touched. It was still cold. I reached out and poured myself a glass. The bubbles fizzed softly, rising to the surface with a cheerful energy. I took a sip. It was crisp and dry and tasted exceptionally expensive. It tasted like justice. Bradley had bought this bottle with money he stole from me to celebrate my exile. Now I was drinking it to celebrate his departure. The symmetry was perfect. I picked up my phone. I did not check my messages. I knew there would be voicemails from Bradley crying about the bus ride and texts from Megan threatening lawsuits she could not afford. I deleted them all without listening. Instead, I dialed a number I had saved in my bookmarks for months, but never had the courage to call. "Good afternoon," I said when the agent answered. "This is Tobias King. I am looking at the European Engineering Heritage Tour. Yes, the one that visits the Roman aqueducts and the German bridges. I would like to book a seat. I paused, listening to the agent. No, I said firmly. Not economy. First class. I want the lie-flat seat. And I want the best suite in every hotel. I took another sip of wine, looking around my living room. The afternoon sun was streaming in, hitting the spot on the wall where Carolyn's photo used to be. I would have to get it reframed. I would get a better frame this time. Something gold. She deserved it. The agent asked for my return date. Make it a month, I said. Maybe 6 weeks. But make sure it is a round-trip ticket. I have a house to come back to. A house that needs some work, but has good bones. I finalized the booking and hung up. I sat there as the sun went down, watching the city lights of Seattle flicker on one by one. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I felt lighter than I had in years. The dead weight was gone. The termites had been fumigated. The foundation had been reinforced. I raised my glass to the empty room, to the memory of Caroline and to the man I used to be. They wanted me to take a one-way trip. They wanted me to sail off into the oblivion and leave them the keys to the kingdom. They wanted me to disappear. Well, I did. I disappeared from their lives completely. I cut the ropes. I pulled up the anchor. I sailed away from their greed and their lies and their disrespect. I gave them exactly what they asked for, a departure. But they forgot one thing about structural engineers. We build things to last. And we know that sometimes to save the building, you have to condemn the annex. I finished the wine and set the glass down. It was time to get some sleep. I had a plane to catch. And this time I was packing my own bags. I learned that a parent's job is not to be a permanent safety net, but to build a foundation so strong that your children learn to stand on their own. For years, I thought love meant saying yes. I thought it meant giving until I was empty. But real love is honest. Real love has boundaries. By cutting the cord, I didn't just save my financial future. I gave my son the only thing he actually needed, which was the dignity of his own struggle. You cannot carry someone who refuses to walk. Sometimes you have to let go so you can both survive. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I am looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.